Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Hope everybody is having a great day. My fingers are tired. Disney announced the rest of 2021 today. Finally, we've been waiting for months for this to happen. They don't tell us it's happening, and bam, it's available. It was September 26th. Now we can go through the end of the year. So that's where I've been today. I haven't been on the Discord server. I've been taking care of guests to get them those 50th anniversary reservations. So if you're one of those folks, thank you so much. We can take care of you if you need it. So sorry, we're a couple hours late on this, but wanted to take care of everybody first. We're going to be having our Mike in the Midwest today. We're just talking about haunted houses for October. My experiences with haunted houses here in the Midwest. We're going to do kind of a more general Halloween memories coming up later this month. But right now, we're going to be talking about just experiences with haunted houses, and I worked at a haunted house. So we'll be talking about that towards the end. So let's do Mike in the Midwest, episode 17. What's today's date? The 15th. Let me mute the old phone and we'll get going. Just got a push alert from Taco Bell. It's like they know me. All right, here we go. Welcome to episode number 17 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast here for the patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast. I am Mike Rallman, host of the Be Our Guest podcast, and huge shout out to all of our patrons who are tuned in here today. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, for sticking with us and allowing us to keep this podcast going. We're trying to put out as much content as possible. We get together about 5 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays live. And here on Thursdays on the Patreon feed. And I sure appreciate you guys being here. This means the world to me, this podcast, because I've made friends from all around the world, got to do things I never thought I would get to do. And it's because of your kindness and helping us through this little rough patch. But things are turning around. I think we'll get through this and we'll be fine. So thanks for hanging in there. Please continue to support the show here on Patreon. It means a lot. And we're going to have some more content coming. I have some ideas coming up for November and December just for our patrons. So I'm working on that. So stand by for that. But I think we're going to have something pretty cool coming up here soon. All right. So last week on the episode of the show, we talked about snacks that take you back, right? Those snacks, like for me, a zinger, because my great grandparents actually over in Illinois always had zingers. And they're also not that very common here where I live. So if I come across a box of zingers, I have to get them. Not only for the taste, they're good, they're cakes, they're like ding dongs, but for the memory, right? And I think there's a lot of things like that. Like this time of year, maybe you get some of the Munster cereals like Frankenberry or Count Chocula, stuff like that, that maybe you had on a Saturday morning during the Halloween season as you watched The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, or something like that. So snacks to take you back. Let's get some feedback on what folks said over on the Patreon page from last week's show to kick things off. And I got to start off with, I love this one. This is from my good friend Dana from the Run, Eat, Drink podcast down in South Florida. And congratulations, he just got a promotion, so I'm very excited for that. He commented on the snacks that take you back, and he said 3 words: Totino's Pizza Rolls. Now, let me tell you my story about Totino's Pizza Rolls, because I had to respond to this one. When I became a teacher in 1999-ish, 2000-ish, when I got my first full-time job teaching 6th grade, next door to Pam, actually, at Wedgwood Elementary, we taught 6th grade together. My lunch every single day was a box of pizza rolls. So I would, drop my kids off in the cafeteria. They'd go eat their lunch. We would get 30 minutes to eat lunch. That was it, 30 minutes. And then, you had to go pick up your kids from recess because they had 15 minutes to eat, 15 minutes for recess, and then you had to pick them up. So you had to eat lunch pretty quick, right? You couldn't mess around. You really couldn't go out to eat anywhere. So every day, and I didn't, I couldn't cook a whole lot, and I didn't want to make a lunch. So I just buy boxes and boxes of pizza rolls. And so if you've ever had pizza rolls, I was eating like a 12-year-old basically, and I was 26. But, you throw the pizza rolls in the microwave, cook them for like 2 minutes, and then you take them out. And of course, you don't have a lot of time, like I just said, to eat lunch. So you just pop one in, and every day, I mean, every single day, burn your mouth, because those things were not so bad on the outside, but they were nuclear, like lava on the inside. So yeah, when I think of those, a snack that takes me back with pizza rolls, I think of pain, because those things always had me in a lot of pain. All right, let's get to the other comments here for the snacks that take you back. Monica Lima, thanks for being a patron. Sure appreciate that. She says, the original pudding pops were the best. When our dad did the grocery shopping, we were guaranteed fudge stripe cookies and pudding pops. Mom bought the healthy stuff. I love that. Yeah, pudding pops. I mean, of course, Bill Cosby's had his time lately, but he was always on the TV, right? Hawking those pudding pops, and they always look so good. It's kind of funny because I wasn't really a huge fan of pudding pops, but like I felt like I was missing out because you always saw the commercials, right? So yeah, I get that. And the fudge stripe cookies, the EL fudge, I think they were called, with the Keebler elves. Oh, dude, I tore those things up as a kid. All right, next, Francesca says, and thanks for being a patron, Francesca. Yes, love those pudding pops too. This show made me sad because I remember most of the snacks, but I wasn't allowed to have most of them. I was the kid with an apple or a little red box of Sun-Maid raisins in my lunchbox. My favorite after-school snacks were Totino's pizza rolls. There we go again. And when I was lucky enough to have lunch at my aunt's house, she would cook us Frankenstuffs. Not sure that's the actual name, but they were hot dogs with cheese inside. Gross now, but back then it was awesome. I loved Fat Frog ice cream bars from the ice cream truck as well. I have no idea what Fat Frog ice cream bars are. I don't even know, but it sounds a little scary and maybe good. But Frankenstuffs. Now, see, I just bought, when I was a kid, they were just called cheese dogs. You know, you bought the Oscar Mayer hot dogs. They had cheese on the inside. Now, it wasn't a lot of cheese. It was just enough to say that they were cheese dogs. There was a little cheese on the inside. I love those Frankenstuffs, so I'll have to check that out. Heather Brown, thank you for being a patron. She says, I loved all the bad for you cereals, especially Count Chocula, Boo Berry, and Frankenberry. And I told her that I have some Count Chocula up in the pantry right now. Trisha Hellwig, thanks for being a patron. Sure appreciate that. She says, I would bike to the Hostess outlet store and buy the fruit pies, although I don't think there was any actual fruit in the filling. I also miss 3D Doritos. No sharp points jabbing the roof of your mouth. And I eat the whole grain goldfish to feel better about myself. You know what? I just eat the regular old goldfish. Actually, it's the double cheese or the cheese blast goldfish. Are so cheesy. I just figured goldfish take me right to heaven because that's what they served at Vacation Bible School and, of course, Sunday school. And, I think I miss 3D Doritos. I don't think I've ever had one in my life. I've seen them advertised, obviously, during the Super Bowl and stuff like that. But I don't know why I never picked those up. I'll have to check those out because I think those are still around. I've just gone regular Doritos. And my good buddy Craig Burnett, last comment here. Thanks for being a patron. I still eat many of these snacks. I'm currently working on a box of Cookie Crisp. Oh, I miss Cookie Crisp. So good. And we are empty nesters. I still get Mr. Misty's at Dairy Queen if I'm not too hungry. Otherwise, it's Peanut Buster Parfait or something heavier. I shouldn't say this, but I get Peanut Buster Parfaits at least once a week. That's why I run so much. They're the best. Can't beat it. Ice cream, chocolate, and peanuts. Oh my gosh. He also says the red zingers were actually raspberry with coconut topping. Growing up, we had a Dolly Madison and Hostess thrift store locally and kept an extra freezer full of many of those treats. I spent many of my teen years eating zingers frozen. Oh my gosh, I've never thought of that. Freeze one. Oh my God, I got to try this. Before COVID, our office had a large goldfish dispenser on each floor, and that served as my all-day snack. It's like heaven. Seriously, goldfish vending machine or goldfish dispensers, that sign me up. I'm still working from home, and I'm guessing the community goldfish will not be there when I return to the office. Thanks, Craig. I got to hang out with Craig because I gotta see these. You know what? And if they get rid of the COVID goldfish dispensers, I want to buy one. I could put it right next to my Pac-Man machine and right here next to the podcasting stuff, the rig. And, like if we have whenever we do another 12-hour live show here from the house, I could just, just it's like the gerbil or something. You hit the button and you get a little goldfish. That'd be sweet. Thanks for all the comments. Do add comments to each show over at patreon.com/BeOurGuestPodcast. I love hearing what you guys have to say, because obviously this show doesn't go out to an audience as wide as the general podcast. So your comments mean a lot to me. So either let me know on social media over on the Patreon, and we'll add it to next week's show. But let's get to today's topic, which is haunted houses. Now, let me ask you this, because I think this is going to be a show that comes down similar to what last week's show was. And we had, I feel bad because Francesca, she didn't get the good stuff. She got the raisins and the apples, right? She didn't get the zingers and all that stuff like I had. I think it's going to be the same for some of our listeners here and our patrons, that depending on how your parents were, either you could go to a haunted house or maybe you are not allowed to, because as I've said here, I grew up in a, we grew up in a Baptist church. So, it wasn't like my parents were pushing me into going to haunted houses, but as I got older, like in middle school and high school, I was able to go to some, and it was always good fun. And so I grew up in this suburb of St. Louis called Florissant, which is about 15 miles north of the city. Very, very blue collar area, very middle of the, like a middle socioeconomic area. And so we had some haunted houses around, right? Especially growing up. Of course, like when you're in elementary school, I think our gym at Duchesne Elementary did kind of a little fun house. It really wasn't a haunted house, but it had like clowns. But see, back then when I was like in kindergarten, clowns were fun, right? Now clowns are like the scariest thing on the planet, right? You give a clown to like an elementary school kid, now they run like, are we trying to kill me? Clowns back when we were in elementary school, they were just fun, right? They were just happy. So it was like clowns. And I do remember, well, I'll save my kindergarten costume for a show here later this month. But yeah, so that was kind of the first introduction to haunted house, just like having some fun in the gym at your elementary school. Now, we had some other haunted houses. So another haunted house that I experienced was probably in middle to early high school. And our group of JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce here in North County, and where I lived in Florissant, they put on a haunted house out in a park, but they had kind of a building there, like an outbuilding. And so this JCs, if you don't know what the JCs are, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, they're basically just a group of business people that get together to do community service, to raise money for charities and so forth. So I was actually a member of the JCs later, but I wasn't a member now. I just went out to the JCs haunted house. And so it wasn't super scary, because it was one of those things that was kind of like a family event. They sold s'more kits. They had, like a guy playing the guitar, some country and Western music and stuff like that. But you could go through the haunted house when you were there, right? And all the JCs, they'd volunteer to build it for the month before. They would man it. They would be inside the house dressed up as scare actors. And it was a good time. But I mean, you were in and out of the house probably in 5 to 7 minutes. It's probably, I can't remember, like $5 to go through as donation to charity. They gave it to, some charity in our area. And it was a good time. But it was more than the haunted house. There was a lot going on outside of the house. And that's good for first introduction, because the thing is with this haunted house, and Ricky's parents were actually in the JCs. They were big into this. So just there's our Be Our Guest podcast connection. But the funny thing is that, anytime you have like a volunteer Halloween event, you have people that are, they're kind of like just there to be a part of the whole experience. But then it seems like every time there's a volunteer Halloween event, there's people that love Halloween and they love scaring the stuff out of everybody else, right? They go the extra mile, even though it's a family friendly haunted house and it's a lot of fun. They're in there and they want, the little kids that are leaving have to change their pants, right? And they shouldn't be doing that because it's a family haunted house. But I do remember that there was a couple of people in there going the extra mile, you could say. And it was fun for us because we were like in middle school. We loved it. But I do remember a few little kids crying. And I don't know if it was meant to have crying at that point. So interesting. Okay, so let me tell you about some of the other places. Once we got into high school and we could drive, we really kind of expanded on our haunted house exploration once it came to the fall. So what would happen is, of course, when you're in high school, and I don't know if it was like this where you grew up, but in, where I grew up here in St. Louis, everybody listened to basically the same one or two radio stations, the top 40 radio station. In St. Louis, it was either Q106.5 or we had KHTR 103.3, and we had Hot 97. So you'd listen to one of those stations. And of course, this was when the haunted houses were really getting going. And I graduated high school in 92. So this would have been like around 90, 89-ish. And this is when haunted houses kind of really became an industry. So come the beginning of September, you would start hearing these commercials on the radio. And you're like, oh, and they always sounded so cool. Sound effects, people getting chased by chainsaws, chains rattling in the background, right? That's the piano music that freaks you out. And, they're telling you to come to the haunted houses. And so it'd be 3 or 4 big ones in St. Louis. The funny thing is about the haunted houses that we had in St. Louis that were a ton of fun. They were on the other side of St. Louis. Like, we're in a northern suburb where I grew up in St. Louis. All the haunted houses were either west of St. Louis by a good bit or well south of St. Louis. They usually were not even in St. Louis County. They were in adjoining counties, which I don't know why. And some of them were in St. Louis County, but not all. I'm wondering if some of them were not in like Jefferson County and the counties that border St. Louis County because of, regulations or lack of regulations once you get more out into the rural areas, which kind of makes you scared. So a couple of the haunted houses that we used to visit, there was one, and it was in a place called Kimmswick, Missouri. Now, if you've ever been in this area, Kimmswick is this quaint little town, right? It's where all the old ladies go with their red hats, and it's got a lot of places to antique. You can go and get, have your little lunch with your sandwiches and your pies. It's a cute little place, right? It's one of the oldest cities in the state of Missouri, right along the Missouri River, down south on Interstate 55. It's probably about an hour and 10 minutes from where I grew up in Florissant. So we hear on the radio, there's this thing called the House on Haunted Hill. So we're like, oh yeah, we got to go to this thing, right? It's the House on Haunted Hill. And the thing about it in high school was that even before you went there and you heard the radio commercials, you didn't, you kind of got the word of mouth, right? And the word of mouth was not always true because somebody would get out there probably before you. But of course, by the time you heard the story, it was typically, 10 times worse, right? Like, 7 people went in and only 6 came out. I was there. No, I'm not kidding. I was there last weekend and that happened. And you're like, whatever. So House on Haunted Hill was very, very interesting because you would drive all this way. And, when you're like 16 and you just got your license, driving an hour from home to a place you really don't know is an adventure in itself, right? And you're with all your buddies, usually too many people. I had an MGB, then I had a pickup truck. So either way, I didn't have a lot of space, but I do remember that we like took a couple cars down to Imperial Kimmswick is what it's called. And what it is you kind of, all these haunted houses, one of the things they had were those big searchlights in the sky. So you would get on the interstate and get off at the Kimmswick exit off the interstate. And they had these big searchlights. So you kind of follow them and that would take you to the haunted house. Okay. So we get there. Thing about this haunted house is that when you got there to the parking lot, that was not where the haunted house was. You actually got on an old, decrepit, shabby school bus, right? I don't know if you've ever been on a float trip in the Midwest, like where you get on a float trip where you float down like a smaller river, not like the Mississippi, but we have what's called the Current River or the Merrimack River or the Huzzah River. You get on like a raft and float down the river in the summertime. Well, they take you upriver in these buses that are probably from the 50s. They don't have windows. They're a mess. Well, it's one of those buses. So you get to this place, you pay your money, and then and there was like $10 or something back in the day. You get on this bus and you're just like blind faith that they're not going to take you somewhere out in the, because this is way out in the sticks. They could just take you in this bus out there and just wipe you out. You don't know. So anyway, they take you around a little bit and then you get up to this haunted house and they throw everybody off and you see all the other people waiting in line. And then I just remember like, whoa, this house is crazy. So it was your typical haunted house. I think the experience was probably about 15 minutes long. Of course, you go in, it's dark, you can't find anything. There's scare actors in there, and we had a good old time. But the thing I remember about Haunted House on Haunted Hill was just the excitement of getting on the bus and, kind of transferring over to the haunted house, because it made you nervous. You were anticipating what was going to happen. The house itself was a lot of fun, but it was kind of the whole experience and the fact that we had to drive so far away. Now I want to get to two other experiences with haunted houses before we get out of here today. And I'm going to save the best experience for last. Okay. That's when I worked at a haunted house. That was so much fun. We're going to save that for last. Before we get to that, one other haunted house story that I have, and I got to share, is that when Paige was growing up at our old house, now we had a small house, right? Less than 1,000 square feet, Florissant, Missouri, little bitty ranch. We loved this house. It was perfect for us, right? We didn't have extra room, but we made it work. And so every year, Paige was on every kind of sports team. She played basketball. She played soccer. She played softball. And she was always on these teams in what was called the CYC League, which is the Catholic Youth Council. So it was the Catholic Church, like the church team. And then she would play club sports too as well. So she had kind of this core group of friends, 8 or 9, 10 girls that played all the sports together. So what we did was every fall, and also Paige's birthday is November 2nd. So we kind of have we'd have a big party for Halloween, and then we kind of do Paige's birthday at the same time with her friends. So for about 3 or 4 years, we had a haunted house in our house. Okay, so let me tell you about this, and I'll post some pictures on the Patreon so you can see this, because we had some crazy stuff in this little bitty house. So what we did was we'd invite probably 20 or 30 of Paige's friends and like their siblings over to our house. And we did it old school. We were like the Charlie Brown Halloween special. We'd have games out in the front yard. We had pass the pumpkin up and down, like through the legs overhead, through the legs overhead. We made mummies with toilet paper. We bobbed for apples. God, you couldn't do that right now, right? It's a wonder we didn't kill the kids. We had donuts on strings. They had a contest who could eat the donut without their hands, all gone on the string before anybody else. We had glow-in-the-dark soccer. We got a glow-in-the-dark soccer ball. I found glow-in-the-dark paint, painted a soccer field on the backyard. We did that. I mean, we had a scavenger hunt in the dark with the flashlights. I mean, we had some awesome stuff. And this is just the outside part. The best part of this party, and it became legendary with Paige's friends, we turned the basement into a haunted house. Now, this was well before the Be Our Guest podcast, because they would have totally crushed my podcast studio, because this is exactly where later on I had the podcast stuff in the basement. But this was before the show. So we put this party on with Paige's best friend's parents. Her best friend was Molly, and her parents were Chris and Jeff. And we did everything with them for years and years. We went to Walt Disney World with them. So we hosted the party. And when we had this party, we kind of split the cost, because we went to like great lengths, right? We had other parents come over and help us. And fortunately, remember, my dad growing up, he owned a mobile DJ company. So when you do a wedding or a prom or something, you have all these extra cool things like laying around. Like we had 2 fog machines. We had laser lights. We had floodlights. We had colored like gel lights. We had, of course, sound systems. So we took the basement and fogged it up. We took we had those fluorescent tube lights in the basement. Nope. We took the tubes out. We put black lights in all those. And we had a bathroom down there in a separate room. We had a laundry room, and we had kind of an L-shaped main area in the basement. And so we just like fogged it out. We had this, heartbeat just playing out of this big speaker in the basement. Now remember, the kids are like 9 or 10. Okay, that was awesome, right? The basement, we had people down there, probably 5 or 6 of us would be like in strategic areas in the basement. Some of us had chains. Some of us had like things we could slap when they got right up on you. Of course, we didn't touch kids, but we'd scare. I mean, we had a good time because we knew these kids. I coached these kids. I coached these girls in all kinds of sports. So it was so fun to kind of get even with them at Halloween. It was awesome. Now, the best part about this haunted house, not only did we have people down there and they're running the wrong way, they're running into walls, they just want to get out because they all wanted to be too cool for school, like at the age of 10. Like nobody had to act like they were scared, but then they would get down there and they would freak out because you can't see to get back up the steps. The steps were very skinny. And the best part about this is there were no steps to get to the basement, because in our base to get down into the haunted house, we had like a landing. So like you went to the basement off the kitchen, you went down one step, and there was a little landing, and then turn 90 degrees to the left and it would take you to the stairs to the basement. However, my brother-in-law, Andy, who was there as well, he made us a slide for the steps. So we covered up the steps with this slide that the kids would sit down on a pillow. We had an old pillow and they would slide down the steps, and it was totally into the fog. There were no lights. So basically the kids disappeared about halfway down the steps. And so like if other kids were watching, like they just saw their friend down the steps, down the slide, and they were gone. And so the funny thing was there was nobody around the, like where they landed on this, the bottom of the slide. Right. So you would hear them, and we'd send them down usually 2 at a time. So you'd hear them like, dude, I don't want to be down here now. Cause they would get down to the bottom of the steps and they could not see anything. And it was so foggy. And you got the and creaky side, the special effects is cranking. These kids, we did have one kid wet their pants because they got so scared. We had a couple kids try to run up the slide. The slide was super slick. They couldn't do that. We had to turn, it's like other lights on for some of the kids, but oh my gosh, it was the best thing ever. So if you are a parent and you have kids of that age, do a haunted house in your basement sometime for your family. You will get as much enjoyment out of it as the kids. Paige is 23 and her friends still ask if we're going to do that again. It was that much fun. So we enjoyed that. That was one of our great Halloween memories. Again, I'll put pictures up on the Patreon this week, so check that out. Oh man, I miss those days. Okay, finally, I'll get to one final story about haunted houses. So one fall, again, we used to go around to the haunted houses in St. Louis, but I saw an ad in the newspaper that they needed part-time workers at a haunted house called Silo X. And this was like the best haunted house in St. Louis. It had the best commercials on the radio. This is the one everybody wanted to go to. It was in St. Louis County, so it wasn't quite as far away. It was right at the corner of Interstate 44 and Highway 141 in a pretty popular area of our, city. So the thing was they took this lot that was normally just kind of an area that floods most of the year. And then about August, you would see them put up like temporary walls, just plywood and 2x4s, cover it up. They had a kind of a big metal building that they used as well. And it became a haunted house. And this thing was big. And it was like a maze. They made a huge maze out of it. So to go through Silo X, because I had gone through it a couple of times the year before, it probably takes 20 to 25 minutes to get through the thing. It's big. So when I saw that they were asking for part-time workers, of course I was like 16. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Right. Cause it was before baseball season. I didn't have a lot going on, and it was only for like a month. So I'll go out there, like, you're hired. They hired anybody. It didn't matter. Totally. They hired anybody. They just told you, okay, you got to wear camouflage because the theme of this haunted house was it was a military base where nuclear stuff leaked and everybody was like a mutant, right? Couldn't see that coming, right? So you had to wear like camouflage jackets and pants during the whole time. And you'd get a mask, and you'd had to some kind of a mask. Scary looking mask, but it had to be kind of humid, but messed up looking. Okay. So you got paid like $8 an hour, but here's the thing. Here's the best part about working the haunted house. You got like $8 an hour, but every night they would ask a certain guest, who was the scariest or the best person that you saw in the house? So, they didn't know who you were, but they'd say the person with the chainsaw, or the person that was at the nuclear meltdown reactor, or the person that was in the maze, at the beginning, or something like that. So they would describe that. And if you were named the best scare actor of the night, you got $50 cash on the way out as you went home. So that was cool. I won that twice. I got that twice because it was fun. You would typically work from like 7 to midnight on the weekends. And on the weeknights, you would work like maybe 7 or 8 to like 10:30. So it was a great job. I mean, I was tired the next day at school, but the thing was, my area that I typically worked, I worked at the very beginning of the house. Like I worked probably like within the first 5 minutes, you would encounter me. And it was just a maze back and forth in this big building that had so much fog. It was all fog. So you literally couldn't see maybe a foot or two in front of your face. Like if your hand was a foot out, you probably couldn't see your hand. Just this big green glow, because it had a roof, so it kept all the fog in. Just this big green glowing air. Now, the thing was, when you work in a haunted house, it's fun, right? Because I was in the maze, and the thing is, so these walls are built out of plywood, right? But at the bottom of the plywood, there's about a foot from the ground where there's no plywood. So you can crawl through the areas and go from like place to place in the maze without having to go through the maze itself. You can cut through because there's probably like 18 inches at the bottom where there's no plywood, but you wouldn't know that coming through it because you can't see anything. You can't even see the walls. You just feel your way and hope you're going that way. And the thing is, once you're in there working for a while, you learn the tricks. Like you just listen to people. You stand in the corner. You don't even have to hide because they can't see you. You just stand in the corner. And I remember I sat next to like an electric chair. There was like this electric chair that was motion activated. When they get close, and so the people would freak out. Well, I'd scoot down from it a little bit. And a lot of times they would back away from the electric chair when it scared them. And I'd be right behind them like, boom. And they would jump and run and scatter. And the thing was, the groups were the best, right? When there was like a group of kids, especially if it was like teenage boys that had their girlfriends or something, they're all trying to act tough. The girls are all worried about going through. Sometimes the girls were the brave ones and the guys were the chickens. But we had a group and you would hear them coming. So you would know like, oh, these people are going to be, this is going to be good. Cause you know, you'd hear like somebody saying, oh man, I don't like this. I don't care. I paid $20. Let's leave. Let's go back. And so the thing was, you couldn't really find your way back at this point, but where I was. So, you know, like when you got somebody like that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to give them one. Right. Cause it was so much fun. And I mean, I had people, no kidding, because I'd like pop out, bar, you know, and like get them. And the thing was, like, I had people like, please, Jesus, just let me live. I mean, people were like bowing to me. They were so scared and they couldn't really see me. They just knew somebody was there. They didn't know who it was. Oh my gosh, we had so much fun with that. And the thing was, by the end of the night, no kidding, every night when I drove home, I had no voice because you just constantly yelled in there. And as it got closer to Halloween, just people kept coming through. I mean, it wasn't like a big gap between groups. Like early in like September, you'd have big gaps. You'd have somebody come through, you might have 10 minutes till the next group. Once you got into October, man, it's just like a constant flow of people. So you just, scare people, you'd laugh to yourself, then you'd reset and you'd do it again. Oh my gosh. And back then we didn't have cell phones or anything because I'd have loved to have some footage of that because it was the funniest, best thing ever. I'm so glad I did it. I only did it for like a month, but it was so much fun. Silo X in Valley Park, Missouri. Also too, the one thing was that scared me. What, you know, a lot of the people that worked there were not right. They were just, I don't even know where they came from, but these people like live for working in a haunted house, especially the guy with the chainsaw. Now I didn't have the chainsaw. I just worked at like the maze part. But the dude that had the chainsaw, he enjoyed his job a little too much. Of course, no blade on that chainsaw, but he had no pity on anybody. He would scare the crud out of anybody that came through there. He's making sure you got your money's worth. So yeah, Silo X. It was, if anybody's from St. Louis, you may have heard of it. I may have scared you if you went through the haunted house back in the early 90s, but so much fun. So that's kind of my stories for haunted houses. I have others, but that's pretty much it. I don't want to go too long. But if you have stories about haunted houses, what did you do in your part of the world? Did you have haunted houses that maybe you did at your house or friends' houses? Or did you have charitable groups that did a haunted house, maybe at a firehouse or a police station? Or did you go to these, you know, for-profit haunted houses that were really crazy that just wanted to like scare you to the max, you know, to where you had to, you know, buy a new set of underwear before you drove home? Let me know. Put the comments in the Patreon below. I love this stuff. Let's get into the Halloween spirit here as we celebrate Halloween in October. Again, thank you so much for being a supporter of the show. I hope you enjoy these mini podcasts. Sorry it was a little bit late today. It's been a little crazy with the work side of things. We're going to do this every Thursday, and I appreciate your support so much. So until we talk again, stay safe, stay healthy, and boo to you. All right, everybody. Thanks.